Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I'm joined here by my colleague, my buddy, my pal, my Valentine of one, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, what's going on?
I will not be yours.
I kind of wondered. You're like the get off my lawn kind of old man, kind of Dennis the Menace, Mr. Wilson type. What would you give out on the candy hearts? What would yours say? Like, go away, like grumpy cat kind of Valentine's?
I would not give them candied hearts. I would just say happy Ludicritalia, and I can't remember what it's actually called, which is the original Roman holiday that St. Valentine's Day is based on. And then I would chop their heads off for being on my lawn.
Jeez, okay. Put it on a pike so everyone else that goes by is stay away from the Roach residents. You know, we had an article up on, we do this every year at Steel City Underground, and we did not get your contribution this week because, of course, you and I have both been running around like chickens with our heads cut off when it comes to the schedule. So we were trying to come in the middle of the week. Sorry, folks, we're here at the end of the week. But we could still tell you that the Super Bowl sucked and who our favorites, who the Steelers were in love with right now. Valentines are in the air. So, Brian, I picked 3, and I'm curious if we got any overlap. I'm putting you on the spot because this wasn't on the docket, but who are the Steelers you're in love with right now? If you could narrow it down to 3.
Until Cam's not there, Cam's always going to be one of my guys. Right?
Of course.
So let's just move past the grown-ass man, the current Walter Payton Award winner, finally, after many years when he should have won it. Finally, he has.
6 times.
Good. Keanu Benton.
One of mine.
And Joey Porter Jr.
That's another one of mine. I had excuse me, I had a technicality on this one because he's on the roster right now, scheduled to be a free agent, but I'm sure you could guess who my other bromance is with.
One Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
That's correct, my friend. I'm so happy for him. He's like at the top of my list. Joey Porter's got the dog in him, just like his dad. Like, I know a lot of people were already kind of infatuated with him. They wanted the Steelers to draft him just based on name. A lot of folks out there. I'm under the impression, though, that a lot of Steelers fans you've got maybe 4 main college teams they root for. And, of course, there's Steelers fans in Ohio and right on the state border. So you got Ohio State, and you got, within the Big Ten, you got Penn State. So that throws Joey Porter right in there. And then, of course, West Virginia and Pitt, the old backyard brawl. So between those 4 teams, it's like, it isn't a wonder that some people are in love with like Kenny Pickett. I don't know that love affair is still there like it was last year, but there is,
I don't have a romance with Kenny Pickett right now.
You know what's funny? Myself, Tina Rivers, who does a lot of the writing content over at steelcityunderground.com, and yourself, we all snubbed somebody. We snubbed TJ Watt. He gets another snub. He gets a snub for the Valentines from Steel City Underground. It's just that he's so good, we just overlook him, I think.
I definitely don't overlook TJ, and I love TJ, but I can only pick like one vet as far as I'm concerned, right? Because then it's the up-and-coming guys. And so Cam's just the man. Cam's my man. Cam's always been my man. Cam will remain my man until Cam decides to hang him up. At that point, it might be TJ that steps in.
Curious, why'd you pick Benton?
I just really like what he showed us last season, right? I think he's GAM too, right? He is the guy that can step in when Cam finally hangs him up. And I just super impressed with the kid that comes in and does the job he did. Just like the dog that's in him. I like the drive that's in him. I think he's got nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And I think it was more, and this is like where I'd go, and I'm going to talk about TJ here for a second. I know I talked about TJ last week. I did it solo. But myself, it's like defending your picks, right? If Joey Porter Jr., he's got to be good. That's who you're mocking the Steelers. Well, the whole way, I think we had a pretty big, what do you want to say, infatuation with Keanu Benton if he would be there. And
Oh, yes.
it blew my mind that they were able to get the 3 guys they got in the top 50. This year's draft we'll be talking about a lot coming up. People already got their mock drafts out. We don't even know. We don't even have a combine yet. But free agency's looming. That's going to be the big one. But we're talking about snubbing TJ Watt. How'd you feel about that one? Because there isn't a single, this is the way I put it, Brian. They gave it to Myles Garrett based on almost pass rush win rate, almost sacks. Do you think that matters more than actual sacks aside from the other stats?
let me caveat everything that I will say with this.
Mm-hmm.
Of the people nominated for that award, all of them are deserving of the award, right? There isn't anybody on there that should have been like, what the hell is this guy doing on there? He shouldn't be there, right? All of them are outstanding, stellar defensive players. They are impactful. They're game changers. They're game wreckers. All that's true, right? Now, should Myles Garrett have won this award? This is just my opinion. My opinion is no.
Thank you. I didn't know where you were going with that. I was about to be like, okay, folks, last ever show that we're doing here.
Yeah, it is. It's not about homerism. It's not. I don't believe that made up PFF's BS stats should be what determine the award. I don't believe that because he is the best player on what was, for many parts of the year, the best defense, means he should win the award. To me, it is much more impactful to have the best player on a defense that's not the best defense, a guy who still is changing the game because he's going to get the focus, he's going to get the attention, and that is not saying Myles doesn't get attention and Myles doesn't get focus. TJ gets chipped just as much as Myles. I don't care what Micah Parsons says. Screw you. He gets just as much attention as a game wrecker and a game changer, and he didn't vanish during the end of the season.
That's the big one.
Right? And that is not new with Myles Garrett, by the way. Myles Garrett compiles a bunch of stats early in the season and end of the season. Woo, so tired. Can't do anything else. I don't know. Look, I'm not degrading Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is a stellar talent. He is a generational talent. He's a great player. No question about it. And I'm not going to get into the debate of who's better, TJ or Myles. That's not the question. Who was better last year? Forget the surrounding nonsense. Who was the more impactful defensive player last year? In my mind, real, honest-to-God stats are what should be measured, not wizardly potion stats from the people at PFF who are all insane. And so it should have been TJ. Am I gonna go burn down the NFL because
you should.
they didn't win? No. Look, I like the idea that TJ can be mad next year. Right?
Yeah.
I kind of like that idea. Go ahead, ignore him, and what do you do when he has 35 sacks next year, right? Okay, then you can't ignore him anymore, right? I'm okay with it. It's like, do I agree with it? Absolutely not. Do I care? Probably not that much.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I probably given more energy to this than I'd like. I think that a guy was just saying, it feels good like when you're talking about Joey Porter Jr. and Keanu Benton being like, hey, we had these guys, they were on our radar and look how well they did. And that makes us look right and look smart. And I feel like that's the way these awards have gone, because giving 4 of these out to the Cleveland Browns, Kevin Stefanski, Coach of the Year, along with this, over D'Amico Ryans.
I think that's ridiculous.
Dan Campbell won more games. Both of those guys won their division, took teams that hadn't previously been anywhere near sniffed the playoffs in the last few years. I think the Texans a lot more sooner than, I think it was since 1993 or something, that the Lions had actually won their division. Jim Schwartz, now you said it, top defense, but were they? Because they gave up, they didn't give up yards, but they gave up points. And they had a little bend, not break sometimes. when it came to the Browns. So Jim Schwartz did well, but there are definitely guys. You got Callahan, who was the OC with the Bengals. You got Ben Johnson, OC with the Lions. You got some other assistants when it comes to assistants of the year. I find it harder for me. I struggle more arguing against Jim Schwartz. I will give Jim Schwartz, the credit where credit's due and not just homer against him. But Stefanski won by he had one or two more first place votes than Ryans did, and that's how this weighted scale of the votes went. The same thing with Garrett, Garrett versus Watt. Garrett didn't have one sack last 6 games of the regular season. I'll continue to remind people it was against Trevor Siemian of the Jets, not Aaron Rodgers or Zach Wilson or whoever else they had there as a quarterback. And the Browns were up 3 scores when that sack occurred already. And I will also remind them too that TJ Watt drops into coverage. So Myles Garrett does not. So who really has more of an opportunity to on their reps to go after the quarterback, who's tasked more frequently with just going after the quarterback? It's 2 different positions. It makes it difficult. But you're right in that Garrett's impactful, but sure as hell didn't show in the various ways that we really measure impact, whether that be sacks, tackles for loss, quarterback hits. Gets there sometimes, but the thing is usually when TJ's doing this same thing and racking up the stats, he's not the only one on his team racking up the stats. The Browns didn't have anybody else really racking up the stats. Even Zadarius Smith, I think maybe 6.5 sacks or something like that. And Steelers weren't blitz heavy and had a lot of sacks this year either, but you at least know that Alex Highsmith, he got a lot of praise and he had a very high win rate. I'm wondering why he wasn't Defensive Player of the Year. And then the final one, Brian, sorry folks, I'm not trying to be a broken record from the last show. We're gonna get to the free agents too. Trust me, it's going somewhere because we're talking about some of this, because somebody will be like, well, if they signed Joe Flacco as a comeback player of the year was pretty much a joke. I think you and I may have had a little talk about this otherwise, because we watched Jalen Hurts and the Eagles lose to Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. Obviously they won their division by default. They wouldn't have made it if they were in the AFC, obviously. Right. But Baker throwing over 4,000 yards, not having a bunch of turnovers, however many touchdowns, everything he had, it was a terrible segue, but I'm still going to use it. He was left for dead, and then there was a guy that was actually dead. Yeah,
there's the guy that was actually dead and came back to play. I think that how much more can you define comeback player of the year? Hi, I have risen from the dead.
Yeah, I mean, it's so the love affair with just the Cleveland thing. I mean, I had Flacco projected over a 17-game season. I think he threw. Oh, let me pull it up real quick because I don't want to misquote this.
While you're pulling it up, let me just say,
go for
it. The national media, PFF, all these, they have had their heads so far up the Browns' ass for the last 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 seasons, anointing them Super Bowl champions in the preseasons, just all over them. They want the Browns to win a Super Bowl so bad. They want the Browns to be pertinent and be meaningful so bad so that they can all go, see, we knew what we were. Look, the Browns have gotten to be a much better team than they were. They are a legitimate team, not taking anything away from them in that sense. But please, come on. They're not the creme de la creme of the NFL. They just aren't.
Best of the year. You would think it would be, I don't know, a team that wins their conference, team that's actually going to be in the Super Bowl. That's part of the problem of them voting for these awards even before postseason. I know they want it to be a regular season award or whatever, but still, Myles Garrett in the regular season, it's 6 games, 5 games without a sack. And I've showed you many times all the numbers. Go back on one of the previous episodes about how he's just not, it's not there. He disappears late in the season every single year. And to me, that's not a defensive player of the year. It's got to be somebody that wrecks a game every single game. And Micah Parsons saying that, he's just, that guy's jelly too. In fact, I probably wouldn't have given it to him. I would have rather, somebody like Trey Hendrickson's an outlier on that, but Max Crosby had a really damn good year. If you're gonna, I didn't have as much problem when TJ didn't win it the other years when it was like Stephon Gilmore, Aaron Donald. Those guys had fantastic seasons. Garrett did not jump off the page whatsoever. I'm sorry. And the Browns won a lot. They won some close games by the skin of their teeth, which leads me to Flacco. His projected 27 picks over a 17-game season. Okay. There's only 2 guys in the last 20 years or this century that have thrown that many or that more than 27 interceptions. One was Jameis Winston back in 2019. He had like 30 of them. And then you got to go back to like 06 or 08 or something like that, whenever Brett Favre was still hanging around, and he had like 28. Eli Manning somewhere in the middle there, like 2013, had 27 as well. And nobody else, you get up to like 24, 25. Most of those guys are getting benched. You know what I mean? They're not going to be still out there. So that's what really, like, you have this short window. It's like 13 touchdowns. Okay, 8 interceptions. We know he's a turnover machine. He's just carefree, throwing it all around the field. What'd that do for you in the postseason? You don't have that postseason game to use as a benchmark there. So what we do have, though, segueing now to the Steelers stuff, we don't want Joe Flacco. No. That's for sure. I don't want Ryan Tannehill either. I may as well get your thoughts on that, because that's about the closest guy. He's the one that's available. I don't want Justin Fields. We talked about him. I don't want Kirk Cousins. I don't want Russell Wilson. I don't want any of these guys. Like, everybody just needs to lay off, you know?
I'm going to tell you, I give credit where credit is due. When one of the, beat writers nails something, I will tell you that I think they nailed something. And Mark Caboli's article about what they need to do is dead on, right? If they legitimately are going to make the quarterback competition a actual competition, there is only one person in the entire league that makes sense for them to bring into that room, and it's Mason Rudolph. That's it. Now, if Mason goes elsewhere for whatever reason, forget it. Either you're going to replace Pickett, or you've just said Pickett's the guy. Ryan Tannehill is not competition for Kenny Pickett. He is a journeyman, past his prime, maybe decent backup, but Joe Flacco-esque in the sense that he couldn't beat out Levi Strauss. So forget it. He's not competition for Kenny Pickett. If you go out and get Justin Fields, you're saying Justin Fields is your quarterback. You're not saying Kenny Pickett is going to compete with Justin Fields, because you're going to have to give up capital to get him. It's not a veteran signing. Right? The guy who has proved he can give Kenny Pickett competition is Mason Rudolph. And that's it. So if you're going to sign Mason, you don't sign you can sign Ryan Tannehill and make him your third quarterback, right? I don't care about that, but you're not going to spend a good amount of money to do that, right? Mason and Kenny should be the competition. If it's anything else, it's not a competition.
Yep, and we've talked about that. We don't really want to have a three-headed monster, three-way split or anything. It doesn't do any good for the third quarterback. It probably doesn't do any good for QB1. The only guy that really it does any well for is if you have a QB2. And yeah, Mason Caboli, I'll give credit to. He's probably the only other guy that's been like the flag bearer for Mason Rudolph other than myself. So he's been we see eye to eye on a lot of this stuff, and I agree, because, like, again, if either of those guys fail, then you're having a bad season, you're drafting a lot higher, and maybe you're in shot of one of these quarterbacks. People are like, it's a very quarterback deep draft, and I'm like, let me remind you, the last quarterback deep draft was like Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, Lamar Jackson. Okay, a couple of those guys went later. Mason Rudolph was the sixth of those guys. You still don't know is that a deep draft? There aren't very many guys that go outside the first round. Dak Prescott, because he had whatever off-field things that were influencing his, he kept falling because of whatever, and it was nonsense. And there's a guy that probably had a as good of a, argument to be the league MVP as well, over even Lamar Jackson. But a lot of people weren't picking the Cowboys to be the winners. So let me,
because this will segue into what we're talking about.
Yes.
There is no more definitive, example of how hit or miss quarterbacks in the first round are than the fact that Mitch Trubisky was taken ahead of Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. And I know people think Mahomes is interesting, because he switched colleges and everything like that, and where he fell. And I remind you, Mac Jones was in the same territory. So, I mean, you just never, but, if you're going to get a quarterback, people will continue. How do you feel about this, Brian? The people that say that Kenny Pickett was a third round quarterback or would have fell into the third round. I don't find that. I think If
Don't
he
buy that at
slides,
all.
I don't either. I think he slides into like around 30.
Trubisky was what, number 2?
What's that?
He was the second round. He was the second pick in the draft, Trubisky.
Yeah.
And you're going to tell me Trubisky has more potential or had more potential or showed more potential than Kenny Pickett? No, you're full of it. Here's the thing. There were other positions that were important in that draft, and there were less people who were quarterback needy in that draft, and there were less quarterbacks in that draft. Does Kenny Pickett slide to the second round? Maybe. Does he slide to the third? No, forget it. No way. They're not. The first quarterback taken in that draft is not going to be in the third round.
Yeah, and not only that, there were a lot of teams with multiple picks, and that's how we figured that Kenny could be there at 20. We thought a couple of teams like the Panthers or Saints or somebody could have taken a stab, but more than likely somebody else might have moved up into the first round to get that fifth-year option type thing, or they would have moved up higher into the second, like we saw, like, Derek Carr, I think, was picked like 33 or something like that years ago with the Raiders, or Jimmy Garoppolo. That's the thing that gets me too. Oh, we don't, people think that Mason Rudolph's going to get this huge contract. So this goes into who stays, who goes, who's already gone. Who's already gone is Mitch Trubisky, which I think we should have never been extended last year. Paid him more money, still has some dead hits.
Yeah, but it's really not that bad. I mean,
it could be worse.
They're not damaged by the Mitch Trubisky contract. So the fact that they cut bait, I'm happy they cut bait.
Could you trust ever playing him again?
Not in a million years.
No.
Look, you saw Mitch Trubisky almost played himself out of the league in his time with the Steelers. Whether you want to blame Matt Canada, whether you want to blame Mitch, whether you want to blame the offensive line, whatever you want to blame, right? Mitch was god awful. He maybe had 2 or 3 drives that were quality in his time here. The rest of it just was crap. He was terrible.
2 or 3 are we being generous?
Maybe. So you're talking about a guy who you could never have, with any sense of confidence, put him back in a game and thought, yeah, we got a chance with him. Your team was never going to believe that. The fact that he got voted captain is now still makes me confused, right? He just must be a hell of a nice guy and have shown the right leadership capabilities and other things, because I guarantee you there's no way he was getting that seat later on again, right? It just was bad, and he should have been absolutely cut, which he was. I get it. The first year, you don't know. You got the whole Matt Canada controversy. You got offensive line problems. You just don't know, right? The second year, seeing what he actually was worse, and it's hard to imagine that because he was so bad the first year. But he was worse last year. So, yeah, you just got to cut bait, and that's what they did. So,
Yeah, agreed, man. And it was the cap number. I'm like, they signed Rudolph first last year.
Oh,
like a day or two ahead. Go ahead.
So I read this one article where somebody was pontificating and complaining about all of the armchair Steelers experts, which, by the way, that's us. Like, here's an armchair. I'm sitting in it. We're an armchair. We're armchair Steelers experts, right? We're praising the Mitch Trubisky signing as a Steelers. That's a Steelers signing, a la Jerome Bettis, a la, this guy.
No, Jerome Bettis was already
James Ferry. I know.
Jerome Bettis was a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro already, like as a rookie or second year with the Rams.
But here's the thing. Nobody here ever said that. I don't know where people were. I mean, maybe there were crazy people out there in the world going, I don't know, Mitch might turn it around. We said at the very beginning, both you and I said, at best, he can be a bridge quarterback until Kenny's ready. You're not going to win anything with him, right? Mm-hmm. But he might be able to get you through until Kenny's ready. That's what we said. Nobody thought this was the savior of signings. I just that annoyed the crap out of me when I was reading that.
Yeah. What was I gonna say with that? So yeah, it's the same thing. You know what, dude? I'm dealing with that same thing right now with the Justin Fields stuff. Everyone, there's a few people that are out there that are actually of the same mindset as I am, but he's had like 38 starts, not as many as Trubisky had, but close. So you have a good idea who he is. I've said it a million times. Last 28 games, 300-yard pass game. But Joe, he runs the football. Oh, he does, but he didn't do as well with that last year as he did the year before. And he's a turnover machine. When he runs the football, he also tends to put it on the ground. He has, let me see, I'm trying to find the actual numbers, but I think I got to find it under rushing and receiving. 38 fumbles on 356 carries. Would you put a running back on the field that has that many fumbles?
I finally went into Slack the other day, our little back channel thing, and I saw Tina's little visual for Maths with Brian. We should use that. I liked it. Anyway, maths with.
I'll see if I can find it.
We need the maths.
Okay, math. It's coming. I always have maths with Joe up first. Here we go.
I know. Well, you're.
Hey, you know what? I gotta jump in too. There was somebody I was talking to on Facebook just like the other day that replied back to me in one of these Steeler groups, and it just said maths with Joe, and it was this Justin Fields stuff already. So
here you go. Maths with Brian. How many carries did you say he had? 350 something?
356.
356, 38 fumbles. That means by doing math, 1 out of every 10 carries, he fumbles the ball.
Yeah, actually more.
I know.
It's like 11 or 12% somewhere in there if we're going to
look.
If we're going to go that.
I'm going to stick to exactly what I said before. All right? If you can get Justin Fields for nothing, right? 3rd round pick, something that isn't really devastatingly impactful to you, I'm okay with it. It's only if they haven't been able to sign Mason, right? Because who knows? With Arthur Smith, a guy who's got the history with mobile quarterbacks, maybe he does something with Justin Fields. We saw Justin Fields play at Ohio State. We know that he can play, right? Maybe he can't play in the NFL. But if they don't sign Mason, they're screwed anyway, because I don't think Kenny's the guy right now. And we'll see. Kenny's not as mobile, but he does turn the ball over less, right? So I'd be okay with it, but only if it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, right? All these trade things for Justin Fields where people are giving up high 2nd round picks or low 1st round, forget that. No. If nobody wanted him and then we could get him for next to nothing, cool, I'm in. Right?
Yeah. Now, is he competition? Because you were saying Tannehill is Tannehill and Tannehill.
If you give up what they're talking about, he's not competition.
Well, that's the difference. Depending on compensation, if they were to give up a 1st round pick, now all of a sudden you're trying to say this guy is QB1, and nobody's giving up a 1st round pick because they all know the Bears
for him
are stuck.
Now he's competition. Right?
Yeah.
You don't have the same amount of investment in him that makes you go, I got to play this guy to see what he's got.
Do you remember who the Steelers got in the 3rd round last year? Or even 4th round? Or those middle rounds? Darnell Washington?
Washington.
And then
Nick Herbig. Herbig was 4th, right?
Yeah, Nick Herbig. Are you willing to give them up for a guy that's going to sit on the bench that has how many 40 touchdowns, the 30 picks and 38 fumbles and has been sacked 135 times?
I am willing to take a chance on Justin Fields for 3rd round.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to take that same chance for 2nd or 1st.
So do you think that chance will, let's talk about this. When does this ever work out? Are there really okay, Jared Goff and Matt Stafford were already doing well respectively and swapped because Stafford put up a lot of stats, but with a bad team, Goff had already led his to the Super Bowl once. So I don't look at that. Drew Brees was already a good player when he left the Chargers. They went the direction of Phillip Rivers, right?
Let's frame this argument in the correct light.
Yeah.
None of this is a savior move, okay?
Okay, and then none of those guys are Justin Fields either.
Fields, it's a bridge. It's a stopgap. It's saying, we don't have the guy right now, and we need somebody. So we're going to try this one and see what happens. We're throwing the dice because we can't draft a quarterback in this draft. We don't feel that that's the right move because that's starting from scratch. this is a guy at least has some experience. We'll give it a shot, right? Again, all this is caveated on the fact that they didn't sign Mason. They signed Mason. I don't want Justin Fields. I've changed my mind on that.
That's good. I'm glad you've come around on that.
Yeah, if they sign Mason, then that's it. That's what they should be done as far as competition goes.
Yeah.
Whoever else they add is just, that's the third string guy.
That could come from anywhere as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. I've said Dobbs. I've said a late round pick, somebody that barely throws the ball. If you get down to that third guy, it shouldn't be the expectation like Mason was. He came in and they actually won some games, clutch games, 2 road games, make the postseason, right? And that's where I'm at. Like Mason, okay, number one, why would I want Mason back? Some people are still hung on 2019 with Kareth White and Benny Snell running the ball and Nick Vannett, complete bum catching the ball as a tight end, and Dante Moncrief and Tevin Jones and Johnny Holton and all these other guys that weren't very good, right? No quarterbacks coach. Randy Fichtner is your OC. Okay. Jimmy Garoppolo got traded from the New England Patriots. He had 3 starts, 4 starts, and fewer than 100 pass attempts, and landed like $135 million contract or whatever it was with the 49ers. So, like, you just don't know. Like, there's short window
well
things
invested money. Very well invested.
Exactly.
That was you're talking about return on investment there, my friend.
Okay, but Jimmy Garoppolo never hit free agency. He was never available up until whatever trade transpired for him to go to San Francisco. Mason Rudolph was available for free agency, and no one was coming and knocking at the door. He may have had a Jehovah's Witness or a door-to-door salesman or something like that, but it wasn't any NFL teams other than the Steelers. So that's one thing I put in the side. I saw this report, or supposedly Mason's looking for a fresh start. I would like to find out, and don't send me one of these other blogs that are on equal footing with us that have, we have more access than some of them. Okay. I'll go out and that's the most I'll say. I won't tell you level of access, but a lot of them are, if they talk to anybody that's a source, it's a janitor. More than likely that either come from thin air or Mason's agent trying to drum up a market or interest because there wasn't any. And if any of these other quarterbacks we've just been talking about, Ryan Tannehill making about $30 million a year, Russell Wilson up to $40-50 million a year, Justin Fields final year of his rookie contract with a 5th-year option, Kirk Cousins earning 35 or so average per year, and reset that market several years ago with that original 3 years, $96 million contract. Any of these guys are available, plus the teams that are already maneuvering for a draft pick, the Caleb Williams, the Penixes, the Nixes of the world. They're not really looking at Mason Rudolph, I think, in the grand scheme of things. Then you still got like your journeymans, your bridge kind of guys that are out there, like a Jacoby Brissett that'll be floating around. So I find it difficult thinking who the Steelers would sign or who the Steelers would bring in. I think it's got to be Mason. And I do think, unfortunately, it would have to be, but Tannehill could easily get a bigger offer somewhere. He'll get a bigger offer or a bigger number from somebody before Mason Rudolph will, based on the pecking order. I don't think Mason's going to get
I'm not sold on that statement, though. That statement that Ryan Tannehill is going to get a better offer than Mason will right now. Look, I said last year, Mason had no place to go. And as much as I've been touting Mason is the only guy that's going to be legitimate competition for Kenny, I'm still not sold that Mason is a quality quarterback that's going to be a guy, right? But he definitely showed enough at the end of the season to be given that opportunity, right? But that's the difference between this year and last year. Last year, Mason hadn't shown, the last taste in anybody's mouth about Mason Rudolph was not a good one, right? This year, the last taste in people's mouths about Mason Rudolph is pretty much a good story, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's going to be willing to fork over more cash than they should for him. That being said, right, I still believe where Mason lands is with the Steelers. Art Rooney has said that they want him back.
Like Tomlin
has said that they want him back.
Rudolph has said it too.
Rudolph has said he's willing to come back. He would like to stay. But it doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? There is a absolute difference in the structure of the landscape this year than there was last year. There will be interest, and there wasn't last year. So anything could happen. If the Steelers can get it done, and if Mason is really willing to get it done, They get it done before free agency. And I'm going to tell you that if Mason gets into the free agent world, probably he's not signing here. Not because he doesn't want to, but because somebody's going to overpay.
Or he's gonna go out there and find out, like a lot of these guys, that what you think is out there isn't out there, and that the Steelers had a decent offer. Now you got to weigh in all sorts of stuff. Are you moving from Western Pennsylvania? I don't think he has like family that ties him down. Like, let's say a Tyson Alualu. Tyson Alualu stuck between Jacksonville, came to Pittsburgh, loved it, decided to come back. He was going to go back to Jacksonville, stuff like that, right? State income taxes, just living in a different time zone, being homesick, you know what I mean? So wherever he has other roots and ties to could factor into that. But also,
money solves most of that, though.
What's that?
Money solves most of that.
money solves some of that. Well, not if you go to California and then they just take it like, okay, well, you're going to make $3 million. You're going to make $3 million more, but lose $5 million more in taxes. It's a minus whatever.
This is my comparison, right? If I'm a GM and I need a quarterback, right? My quarterback is not good. I want another option for quarterback. Tannehill versus Rudolph. Who do I feel better about after last season? It's not Ryan Tannehill.
No, it's not. But I'll tell you the same thing, like the bad taste thing. Now you've got it the other way with Kenny. And I don't think, in all fairness, I don't think you know 100% who Kenny is. At least you know, one thing you know about Kenny. Kenny is he's got the intangible to win games, to be gutsy, and not turn the ball over. But we haven't seen big plays. We've not seen any kind of numbers. We've seen really, I hate mediocre now that we know means average. Below mediocre offensive performance. This was a regression. But I see Rudolph looking at this too and seeing what happened with Trubisky. Oh, Trubisky signs, and all of a sudden it's like, well, this quarterback fell on our lap. Whatever team you end up with, I don't know who's quarterback needy right now. Commanders, somebody like that signs Rudolph, and is that a good situation? Brand new head coach, and you know what I mean? So a lot of that, I think, factors in, too. We don't know what the exit interview was like.
Throw out people in the top 10 in the draft pecking order, right? They're not signing Mason to a big contract to be their starter.
Do you think
Probably.
Do you think they throw... But I guess it depends on the coaching philosophy, is if you throw the rookie out immediately or if you're going to have some type of competition. That's what they did. The Colts did with Gardner Minshew and then Anthony Richardson. And to be completely honest, when I look at the giant list of names that are here as far as the free agent quarterbacks aside, it's money and it's taking away from if you could find out if Kenny or Mason would be the guy. If you just move on from Mason, you're like, well, he's not the guy, and then you were wrong about that, and then Kenny really stinks. Do you want to be stuck with, I don't know, Kirk Cousins going to be expensive coming off a knee injury, 35, 36 years old? No, yeah. I think he goes back there to Minnesota, to be honest, anyways. Ryan Tannehill, we already talked about. Now he knows Arthur Smith's system. He might be somebody that could be player coach. I would be fine. Let's say Ben was still here. I would be totally cool with Ryan Tannehill coming in and being a backup quarterback option. I don't want him to start 4, 5, 6 games if Kenny has another concussion. Kenny had a lot of injuries this year too. There's a lot of parallels to the way Mason's career originally started too. You've got Jacoby Brissett, Tyrod Taylor, Marcus Mariota, I've been out on for so long. Sam Darnold. Mayfield will go back to Tampa. Drew Lock, Minshew. People are like, oh, Minshew's a gamer. Blah,
oh, my
blah,
God.
blah.
I read somebody's article where they were like, oh, the Steelers managed to sign Gardner Minshew. And I'm like, why in the world? I get it. He played well last year with the Colts. No, you don't sign Gardner Minshew. What's he won? Nothing. Forget it. No.
He's a little.
If he's your guy again, if you forget the competition thing, if you're just like, I need a veteran presence, okay, fine. If you can get him cheap, but I don't think you're going to get him cheap, right? It's just, forget it. No.
Somebody might pay. He bounces around like Nick Foles, and I'll tell you what, Minshew, as opposed to most of everyone I just named on this list, I don't want him in it's the same thing as Tannehill. I don't want him starting multiple games. If it's just somebody you plug in for a couple games and that's it, then he's like a Charlie Batch. He's like a Byron Leftwich. I'm more comfortable with that.
I'm going to tell you what, I've said this before about Kenny, and I'm going to say it again. You're right, because I want to get this out because, as you were mentioning, I'm not out on Kenny, right? Kenny still has potential. And there are some intangibles that you saw. Here's the problem. I was in a conversation with a guy in Atlanta who's a Steelers fan when I was in Atlanta last week. And he's like, what's the deal with Kenny Pickett? And I said, well, what do you think the deal is with Kenny Pickett? And he's like, I don't think he's very good. And I'm like, I don't think we can say that yet one way or the other. And I said, here's why. He's shown the ability to do good things. The problem is he has definitely shown less of that than he has shown of that, right? It's 3/4 of suck with a quarter of, wow, that was really good. And somehow that magic that he sometimes is able to conjure in the fourth quarter has to start translating to full games. If it never does, then he is not the guy, right? He's just not. You cannot consistently win in this league if you suck for 3/4.
Yeah, and if he's not available, if he continues to get injured, he doesn't have
injury stuff is another problem. Yes.
We do need to jump off a quarterback. I didn't want to go through the whole list, but it's just it overwhelms because it's the largest thing there. Trubisky got released. Mason's scheduled to be a free agent, so we would like Mason to be back. There's obviously factors into that. He will probably be the least expensive, though, of most of the names that I mentioned, and probably be the best fit for competition. Otherwise, it's not really a competition. And Fields, you got to give up draft capital, etc. You've got other spots on this roster that are of concern. You've got other guys that have been released. Let's go straight to one that's really, really simple at the top of this list. Okay, your favorite, the BFP. The
big fat punter is gone. Big fat punter is gone.
It took long enough, Brian. And I mean, they had two guys on the 53-man roster to start. They brought Brad Wing in during the season. This was like the guy, like a lot of people say it right. Like I was talking with one of my cousins, Big Mike. Okay. He's not the one that goes to the games with me, but we had a very long conversation about quarterbacks and then also punters. Most people are overlooking, people overlook punters. Don't spend a draft pick on a punter. Well, people are like 7th round pick. That's a bust. No, come on. I'm like, once you get past round 5 and more, everything's a crapshoot. Most of these people are picking names out of a jar. So, boom, a punt, 50 yards. And then you would have one that's 29, one that's 30, and one that's 31. We saw it in the Buffalo playoff game. It's absolutely killer. You can't do that. People talk about quarterback, but if you have Kenny or Mason that can throw a couple of touchdown passes, 250 some yards, and not give up the football, like Justin Fields will kill you because he's giving up the football. Mitch Trubisky kills you because he gives up the football. Presley Harvin kills you because you have a net 20 yards. It's bad. So that's one we can move off of real quick. I didn't look. Are there any veteran punters? I didn't really put it in.
Sign Brad Wing. Brad Wing did a acceptable job. Bring him back in, and then figure out what you're doing next year.
And maybe somebody in camp. You know who's actually a free agent is Braden Mann, who was in the Steelers camp and won that second spot next to Harvin. But yeah, Harvin's numbers were just his net average and everything else went down. And it was so radically inconsistent and people overlook that. But it's just as much as you don't look at the kicker because Boswell is so steady. He's so automatic. He can kick from 55. It's a weapon. It's a tool that a lot of teams struggle with. You got guys, look at the Super Bowl. Dude misses and has the extra point blocked, low kick and everything. And look what that did. That cost the 49ers ultimately.
They're idiots. They should have not taken the ball first. They're dumb.
It's you know what? It's all this analytics stuff that people will defend too. And Dan Campbell got burned by it as well, just being overly aggressive and trusting too much in whatever percentage is or whatever play was surefire. You know what? I've had pocket aces playing Texas Hold'em a number of times, and that's the best hand you could be dealt. And statistically, I should win, and I've lost. I could count as many times maybe I've lost with pocket aces because there's just too many other variety of factors that go into that. So punter, that's one. It's good because we identified that these are guys that were already cut in the last one, and we're looking for maybe more trimming here. Offensive line's going to be interesting, my friend, because we've got Chukwuekorfor gone. That was easy. That's like $8.5 million or whatever that that the Steelers recouped there. So do they move Broderick Jones over to left tackle where they drafted him to originally be? They find another.
They draft the right tackle. They do.
I think they got to find it. I don't think free agency nets a whole lot other than maybe depth. It's very lacking around the league. Does Mason Cole stick around? No. He's not a big. Well, would you rather have Mason Cole and bench him and be a backup center guard. Because he was a guard, Nick came back over to play center again.
What's his cap number?
He's at 6.2. He saves them 4 point. Well, that's where it gets interesting, right? So, I mean, Dan Moore, you want a left tackle. You want Dan Moore. He's entering the final year of his rookie deal. He's somebody that could be a depth guy, but man, he's just so poor. It's just that Chooks was that much worse that they put Jones in there because they couldn't move more to the right. He has no position flexibility, at least any confidence that the Steelers staff has.
Yeah.
So he's limited there. Also looking on the offensive line, I'm not looking at Sumalo or Daniels. Those guys are locked in, right? A core four saves them about 8.7. I'm looking
what is Herbig's number?
That's where I was getting. Herbig is 5.4 and could save them 4 right. On the cap.
I keep Herbig as my backup.
Okay.
And my flex over Mason Cole. All right. And
really?
only
Even with
I could get a little bit
700,000
more out of dumping Mason Cole.
Even well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but even with $700,000 difference in the dead cap,
just close enough. I don't care. I've seen enough of the bad snaps and the low snaps and all that crap. I don't want it. I don't want it.
So how many offensive linemen are we willing to replace is the question. I don't think they're going to cut more outright. I could see them doing.
I think more stays.
Yeah.
Unless, I think more stays regardless, right? Here's what I think that they have to look for a tackle that can play right tackle in the draft. You can probably find that guy 3rd or 4th round, maybe. Mm-hmm. Okay. They have to draft a center. They need to get back to strength in the middle of the line, right? Whether it's the kid from Oregon or the kid from West Virginia, they've got to somehow get one of those two guys, right? And get a top tier center. If it's not one of those guys and they see some magic guy out of some school that I don't know about, fine, I don't care. But you can't draft Kendrick Green again, right? You got to draft a guy who is a center and is going to be able to replace Mason Cole and can be a day one starter. That's the key there, right? I'm okay. You need to get Broderick Jones moved back over to left tackle. You need to get a right tackle that can be a consistent and productive right tackle.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Gilbert was a 2nd round pick, so we don't have to. The Kelvin Beachums and Alejandro Villanuevas of the world were 7th round and undrafted free agent. So if you could at least beef up, you had 2 All Pros when you had Pouncey and you had DeCastro. I'm not drafting a quarterback early. This is offensive line, and you don't have the luxury of last year with the 3 top 50 picks right now, unless there's some maneuvering or anything else that's done. Let me tell you, here's one other thing, Brian, too. Chooks Okorafor, people, even Kaboli said this, and I'm like, from The Athletic, I'm like, why did they trade Okorafor? This league is really needy or whatever. Okay, you and I, Chooks is a bum. They need to get rid of him. Dan Moore is a bum. They need to get rid of him. Wait. Hey, other teams, he's not really a bum. Why don't you give us a 3rd round pick?
Give us a 3rd round pick.
It don't work that. No, they think they're bums too and aren't going to trade. You're not getting anything for them. So I think there's going to be a lot of work still done. Unfortunately, I thought this was going to be the 3-year process. I thought some of these guys would pay. Not everybody pans out, right? Even during that process before, Mike Adams and Kelvin Beachum were in the same draft. Mike Adams was a 2nd round pick out of Ohio State, very high 2nd round pick, and didn't work out as a left, or he was actually a better right tackle, but Marcus Gilbert already had that, and it was like, c'est la vie, you know what I mean? And it took them a while, and you have things that happen. Ramon Foster was an undrafted guy. Matt Filer at one point, an undrafted guy. I was kind of wondering, there's been some rumblings too as to whether or not Mike Munchak, there was a little bit of that floating around, feelers that he might be interested in coming back to coach. And he made miracles with some of those guys, but he already had like some top flight elite talent that was already on that line too. You got to get some of those blue chippers back in there.
If you can get your line to have Isaac, strong center, James Daniels, everything else,
and then Jones.
Yeah, and then Jones on one side or the other.
Yeah,
right.
You're good.
You've got a good line again, right? We talked about this all season long. When you are weak in the middle, and we got tired of seeing Mason Cole get blown up, right? And on top of the bad snaps, right? When you are weak in the middle, it does not matter how strong you are at either guard position or at either tackle position. You've got a weakness up the center of that line, and that is a problem. They need to get strength in the middle of the line. I said this the year they drafted Kendrick Green. I was like, well, maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I wish they had gone earlier and gotten a more competent center.
Creed Humphrey is what everybody still laments over Pat Freiermuth. But then I say, what do you do at the tight end spot? You're damned if you do, damned if you don't, I think. So.
Well, I love Pat Freiermuth, right? I think he's very good. He's got a lot of capabilities. He's got a lot of talent. The problem is he also is injury prone.
Yes.
He's been hurt too much, right? And so, that's a problem when you start to come and try to analyze, options and what do you do with him after his rookie contract's over. If you can't, availability, right? Availability is the best ability, and sometimes he's been less available than we'd like him to be. Yeah. But you don't have an option if you let him go right now. So, they've got issues.
Yeah, and that's still kicking a can. There isn't any of the tight ends I'm looking to touch. You hit the nail on the head with the offensive line, and you still don't know how it works out. I mean,
well, I don't know. Pro Features, their stupid mock draft simulator. I often get the guy, the number one Brock, whatever his name is, down in the third round. So,
I mean, we've talked about it. It's very rare for more than 3 centers to go top 100. There are some that will go in the first round.
Frazier and Jackson Powers, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Those 2 guys will go. And it's one of those 2 guys that I want. I'm going to tell you flat out, if they want the kid from Oregon, they're going to have to take him at 20. I don't think there's no way he's going to be there past when they draft in the second round. If they like the kid from West Virginia, maybe they can get him in the second round, but they're not getting either one of them anywhere after that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Steelers. Oh, I wish people, let me see. I had the full NFL order. Brian, I'm going to have to sneeze here. I don't want to sneeze on camera. That could be.
Well, I'm happy. I'll talk about the center.
Well, we don't need any more center talk. We know that centers, we've identified that. Let's talk about wide receivers. I think it went away.
Okay.
Won't edit it out. We've got a receiver, one more year left under his contract, Deontay Johnson. $10 million cap savings, 15.8 cap hit. And people are already talking about 28 years old.
It's like, I think Deontay has a lot of talent. I think Deontay has a lot of potential. Deontay annoys the crap out of me consistently and has since the beginning of his time with the Steelers. If you can find a guy who's an upgrade, great. If you can't, you can't.
Yeah, because he's not exactly, he might be, people are looking at just figures on this roster and not what it would take to replace him in this wide receiver market where Christian Kirk was making $84 million and Tyreek Hill breaks the bank. And it's just,
a lot of people are like, oh, we'll sign Tyler Boyd. I've seen
isn't he 31?
From every team out there, somebody's like, oh, they're going to steal Tyler Boyd from the Bengals. And I'm like, well, everybody can't sign him. And if there's that much demand for him, it sure as hell ain't going to be us.
Yeah, and not only that, but Tyler Boyd's got a pretty hefty contract. I think Tyler Boyd is either 30 or 31, where we say like the wide receivers fall off a cliff. Let me see here. Yeah, of course we don't have his number. Yeah, he's 30. He's entering. He was 29 for this last season. I don't know his exact birth date, but he's been a cap number. It's been about $10 million each year. He had an extension that was 4 years with the Bengals for $43 million. He's not going to see that kind of money any more in the NFL, I don't think. But somebody might take a stab, 1 year rental or something. But are they going to give him 10 or 12? Look what OBJ got. I mean, he's not got the same kind of panache to his name. He's more a great value brand kind of guy. But I don't know. How many holes are you going to make? Because you already got to fill one tackle. You're looking at a center. Where are you going to get another wide receiver from? Because when I'm still looking at the skill position groups, they have one more move that needs to be made, and that's with Allen Robinson, who has a cap number of close to $12 million. They're going to save 10. He's also 31 years of age. They're not going to extend him. I think this is going to be a straight up it might be a catch release type thing, but they got Calvin Austin that's sitting there. Now, Calvin Austin, they're not ready to cut Robinson and Deontay Johnson and move Austin up into a starting role alongside George Pickens with the quarterback situation being the way it is, and then add somebody else new to this mix or move up like a Callaway or Mims or something that's on one of these futures contracts, practice squad type player, that's just not going to happen. And the Steelers don't have enough picks in this draft. I was trying to see where else they pick at. I think 51 is the very next pick after pick 20, Brian. So 20 and 51. They only got one in the top 50. They find receivers. They got a new receivers coach. That's all fine and dandy, but
did they hire a new receivers coach?
Yes, that's that Zach Azani. That was working as an assistant with, I believe, the Eagles. That Eagles connections there, and as well as Tom
That makes
Arndt.
me sad.
Tom Arndt is a quarterback's coach. They also still have Mike Sullivan as a quarterback's coach, and there was some talk as to whether one becomes a passing game or offensive quality control type, whatever, but we don't know about that yet.
I really wanted them to try and sign Brian Hartline as third.
That would have been an interesting. I wouldn't have been against that. He's done an extremely well job with those Ohio State wide receivers, and now Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator there, which is going to be interesting as well. Jeez, oh man,
I'm only a little bit excited.
Yeah, that's tough. They're just going to throw up all. Is he going to operate the same as Ryan? How do they? Let's talk about that off air. I don't know how they operate in the same space. Those aren't the same two philosophies, right? Chip Kelly's going to have you run 100 plays. That's why he's not in the NFL. Those guys are like. Somebody like Deontay Johnson making 15, 16 million a year is just like, take me out, coach, like every other play. It's just wearing everybody out and they get injured. But looking at some other players, defensive line, big looming question. Your man, one of your Valentines, Cameron Hayward, 22.4 million cap hit, 16 million in savings, age 35. Played with a torn groin for most of the season, was on injured reserve. We thought he was getting better every year, and then all of a sudden Father Time comes in. Now Brett Kiesel played to Lake 38. James Harrison played to 40. It's not to say that Cam can't, but there is a business of football. You sure as hell aren't making a stab at a Kirk Cousins or a Russell Wilson or anybody like that if you wanted to without freeing up some cap space. You can't free up some cap space without getting rid of some of your higher dollar players. You now create another hole on this defensive line. Can you throw Benton out there? Sure. Somebody wants to throw Larry Ogunjobi under the bus here. I don't. We're going to just lump them all in together here, Brian. I don't, because right now, Larry Ogunjobi is going to cost you more to get rid of than to keep. He's a $7 million dead cap, 6.2 cap savings, 13.2 cap number. Who else are you getting that's going to be able to fulfill that? He's 30 years old. I'm not moving on from that position. It's not to say that they can't. I think it's a little riskier because now you've got to find somebody that's a better value or spread their contract out a little more into the future in order to find a suitable comp or somebody like that, unless you're going to throw Benton out there and rely on Hayward. And now you're relying on depth of like Isaiah Loudermilk, and we've all soured on DeMarvin Leal over this last year. He's just not been getting the time for whatever reason. Tomlin was asked about that at the very last presser and was kind of non-committal to saying anything one way or the other, which is usually not a good thing. When you come out and say, hey, we want to do business with Mason. I had an exit interview with Mason. It was good. What was your exit interview like with Mitch Trubisky? Well, we haven't had a chance to talk to him just yet. You know what I mean? So, defensive line, those are some of the names of who stays, who goes. Who do you bring?
I don't think Cam goes. I think that they will restructure Cam.
If anything,
they'll kick money down. They'll add void years, since that's a thing they do now.
You gotta extend.
They'll figure out a way to keep Captain Cam in the fold. And I haven't given up on Cam still being very effective and defying father age, considering that we've learned that he tore that groin early and played with it, and it was never 100% healed. Let him get back to being full strength next season. Let's see what happens. And maybe he'll be Cam of old. But yeah, I mean, look, there is no one wins against Father Time. Eventually, time will take its toll on any of us, except me. I continue to get better with age.
Yeah. Okay.
But at some point, Cam's time will be done. There's no question about it. I just don't think it's yet. I think they will kick his contract down the road. They'll restructure it. I think TJ probably gets restructured, and probably there's some other guys and some other magical weird maths with Omar Khan things that they do.
Maths with Omar.
Yeah, maths with Omar.
That would be an interesting segment, by the way.
Yeah. But I mean, I also think you're right on Larry. If it's going to cost you more to dump a guy than it is to keep a guy, you keep a guy.
Yeah, well, your top 5 contracts are TJ Watt, when it comes to cap number, $30 million. Cam Hayward's next, 22. Micah Fitzpatrick, 21. Deontay, 15.8, edging on 16. Alex Highsmith, edging on 14. Those are your top 5. Larry Ogunjobi, Allen Robinson. They still have Chooks listed on here from over the cap. James Daniels, Isaac Somalo, and Patrick Peterson. It then goes down to like Cole Holcomb, and then on down the line we talked Mason Cole, Nate Herbig, Chris Boswell, Landon Roberts. Some guys still under contract, some not. I do want to talk about the DBs because Patrick Peterson is facing father time. Does he change? Does he have a position change? And if he does, who does that bump out? DeMonte Casey could save the Steelers $3 million. It's not a lot of money, but DeMonte Casey's up there too. He's like 31. So I don't necessarily know that DeMonte Casey, and he's been fine. He hasn't been available, maybe, and he hasn't even been looked at as the real starter, right? They had Keanu Neal out there, who I don't think is back either. Do you play Peterson as a free safety next to Minka? Do you flirt with that? Or do you play Peterson as like one of these big DBs that comes in as like a nickel or dime backer type situation, lined up against tight ends, running backs, smart football player, let him roam a little bit, and maybe bring back an Eric Rose, also in his 30s. So, and is a free agent. I would bring Rowe back. I thought Rowe played... It was almost criminal that guy made. I thought he played so well. It made me question why he was not on an NFL roster toward the end of last season. He came in and, he had to get on a moving train. He had to learn everything out on the fly. And he was playing alongside guys like Elijah Riley, Trenton Thompson. He didn't always have Minka with him. It would have been nice to have seen if Minka was healthy, what Eric Rowe would have done. And the same likewise with Peterson having to be forced into that kind of position because they only had so many available bodies. So I kind of wonder, because KZ was kind of like one of those extra guys. The thing is, you're not going to keep P2 as an extra guy if he has a 6.8 cap savings, but an overall 9.7 cap hit. He's almost $10 million for this upcoming season. I know some of that was... What's that?
Who's
Patrick
10 million?
Peterson.
Yeah, here's the thing. I don't think you can underplay how much Joey Porter has benefited from having Patrick Peterson on the team. Just as a mentor, as a guy to go to, as a support mechanism. And while I don't know that that's necessarily worth $10 million, I won't be surprised if Patrick Peterson gets cut, right? I won't be surprised if they look for savings there. I also won't be surprised if he doesn't, and they keep him as that kind of flex player as you're talking about. Look, I like DeMonte KZ, but DeMonte KZ has some Ryan Clark in him, and that guy doesn't work in the NFL anymore, right? In the sense that you can't be knocking guys' heads off, and he is going to have some liabilities. Plus, if I'm DeMonte KZ, I'm tired of playing that way because my checks aren't enough to cover my fines.
Yeah, and, that's true, man.
There's got to be adjustments there, and who knows how that impacts his game, right? I agree with you on Eric Rowe. I liked what Eric Rowe showed, but again, this is a guy who's fresh, who's come into the system, who didn't play all year. You never know, right? When a lot of those kind of things that happen, and it's like, oh wow, great, Eric Rowe's going to be fantastic next year, and then next year comes along and he stinks. I'm willing to give him a shot for sure. Invite him into camp. They have work to do, and there's going to be more people cut. There just has to be.
Well, also the free agency list, I saved the DBs for last, and I know we're up against it to hammer through, but the scheduled free agents, in addition to what we just said about potential move with like Peterson, Neil is still under contract from what I could tell, and Casey is too. Let me verify that. Yeah, Neil signed a 2-year last year. He cost like chump change, but they've got Levi Wallace, who I say he's gone. This is who stays, who goes. So who could be back? Miles Killebrew, I think, as a special teamer, he's going to find just the right deal. He's been a Terrell Austin favorite for a long time, too. and he could help. This is another one of these things in intangible, Brian, like you said with Patrick Peterson, is these are veteran players. The Steelers don't have a lot of those type of guys, and the guys that can help teach too. And Killebrew's one of those guys. You can at least communicate. James Pierre and Chandon Sullivan are also on this list as well. That's a lot of defensive backs and or special teams contributions. A few of the other names that we didn't discuss, I missed it during the defensive line, was Montravius Adams, Marcus Golden as a reserve edge guy. You do have Herbig, so you could fall back on. Armon Watts was a decent contributor as well. And then some other guys that were kind of pulled in. Oh, Elijah Riley's on this list as well, but that's somebody they could, loop back in if they haven't already. I don't know. Is he like a restricted free agent or something like that? No, he's a UFA. I'm reading off of overthecap.com, so if I'm wrong. And I think the only headliner out of all of these, like you're not looking at Blake Martinez, maybe Miles Boykin is like a contributor. We already talked about Mason Rudolph, Godwin Egwebuke, Christian Kuntz, long snapper. I mean, that's always subjective stuff, right? The biggest name that's left on this, I think, would be a Quan Alexander. Like, what are you going to do? You got a veteran leadership type guy. He's hitting age 30. He has had injury history, but Cole Holcomb's already been in that kind of position too. You're hoping Cole Holcomb's 100%. Landon Roberts. These are all guys that were brought in with veteran presence, and they've got to just stack that as much, or these freak accidents. I think in the case of Quan, it was one of these guys was friendly fire. Holcomb or Quan were, and it's sad that it turns out to be that way. So we'll see what the business of football ends up turning out. But they got a lot of work to do in the secondary and a few reserve roles, either in free agency or the draft.
Yeah, they definitely have a lot of work to do. They have work to do on the offensive line. Like you said, the free agent market for the offensive line, it's not great. I don't know how they're gonna what they can do to help address it there. But they may find something. They may find a way, whether it's through some kind of a trade, whether it's something else. They've got to address it and shore it up, right? And that's going to be a combination of potentially free agents and draft. I would be a little nervous if we went into next season with a rookie center and a rookie right guard and a second-year left, or not rookie right guard, rookie right tackle and a second-year left tackle, right? That would make me a little nervous.
It's been done before, though. So
I know.
Yeah,
I'm just saying it would make me a little nervous. Doesn't mean it wouldn't work. I have faith in Broderick Jones, and I believe if they get the right center, that they're in good shape, right? And I think that makes some whatever his name is. I still can't say his name.
It's another JPJ.
Yeah. Not
the other guy. Yeah, I know. I got to pull up the list, man. I don't have it in front of me. Like I can't even remember the quarterbacks in the draft outside of Bo Nix.
It's Jackson Powers.
For 8 years.
I don't even try and say his last name because I don't care. It's Jackson Powers, whatever his name is.
Jackson Powers Jackson.
Jackson Powers Jackson. Is that what it is? I don't know. Johnson. Call me Jackson. Call me Johnson. I don't know who the hell you are. Anyway, that's why I keep saying the center from Oregon.
Yes.
That's what he is. The center from Oregon. I'll learn his name if we draft him. Zach Frazier, I know the guy from West Virginia. That's fine. I got him. He's easy. That's an easy name. I would like to see them pick one of those two guys up at center, but it's more like I have faith that Isaac and James Daniels are good in those positions, but they need that move in the middle, right? They need that move in the middle to solidify it, and then I'm in a lot better mindset. They have work to do this offseason, and part of that's going to be freeing up space to try and add the right elements through free agency in the way that they can. I won't be stunned, right? If they think that the way their draft is going to fall is center is where they're headed at 20, and that means they miss out on a top tier cornerback that they may want to try and take to match with Joey Porter. If they go after a top tier quarterback or cornerback in free agency, right? Won't surprise me. Won't surprise me if Omar Khan finds a way to get that money there so that they can go after a Snead or somebody in that market, right? Who's going to be one of the top guys. Doesn't mean they're going to get them, right? Mm-hmm. But they're going to find a way. I have faith that they're going to find a way to shore things up. And I will say this right now, before we even start thinking about next year, that I don't believe that whatever they do, is going to turn the Steelers into a Super Bowl contender next year, right? There's too many questions surrounding quarterback for me to believe that. And while stranger things have happened, I believe we have at least one more year after that before maybe we're in that position.
Fair enough. I think it was a bump in the road. It might have been closer if let's just say Kenny stayed healthy, or the thing with Justin Fields. I'm going to go back to that because we've been talking about offensive line, primarily offensive line. Secondary is going to be huge with this too, for this offseason. But a lot of people will say, well, the Bears they had a terrible offensive line. And what exactly do you think the Steelers got? You know what I mean? So you can't really rule out Kenny or Mason or anybody else based on that. But you're also going to bring Fields into a situation that's probably just as bad. My mind just explodes. By the way, the corner market are a bunch of there's proven dudes, but they're older, like Stephon Gilmore at the end of his career, probably 34 years old. Adoree Jackson's 29, Kendall Fuller's 29, Michael Davis 29, Kenny Moore's 29, Chidobe Awuzie is 29, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who got hurt, 27, Emmanuel Mosley, 28. Steve Nelson's floating around out there at 31. Here's one I do like, Brian. Jeff Okudah, if the Falcons allow him to go, 25 years of age. That's a guy that I would be looking at. And I think that's where you're going to have the Steelers probably looking as somebody that they scouted in the draft process. Maybe even going deep, the same thing with the offensive line in that regard. So we'll have some more of that. We'll look at some different free agent targets, but free agency is not looking, super hot. I know somebody's going to go out there and say Jalen Johnson when it comes to the Bears, right? And Jalen Johnson is probably going to have a huge landmark type of deal. If that happened with the Steelers, I'd be tickled pink. But I don't know how many more top 5 or top 10 contracts you could add to this roster. Of course, Cam's is going to eventually expire and free up some money down the road. You don't know what's going to happen with quarterback. That could take a chunk back out where you're saving money right now. So it's all in balance. Deontay's is going to expire. So maybe you get a guy, some by miracle, they sign somebody like that ends up being only $3 or $4 million against the cap this year, but is $13 million in the next 2-3 years of the way they spread the bonuses and stuff out. So I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's more than likely improbable. All depending. And they are getting most of TJ's money out front too, I should say. So that's been one of the good things. So the less they have to restructure or take hits or add void years or anything like that, we don't want to end up in the same situation they were in with an aging Ben Roethlisberger and his contract still tolling for a couple years. They were still paying Polamalu a couple years. They were paying Woodley when Woodley didn't work out. Heath Miller.
Aren't we still paying LaMarr Woodley? I thought we were still paying LaMarr Woodley. It felt like we were paying LaMarr Woodley for 15 years after he retired.
He's got the Bobby Bonilla contract.
Yeah,
yeah. It was 3 years that they were beyond, and they were finally able to get up out from under that. He made. They talk about Steelers or Rooney's or whatever being cheap, and that's just not the case. He was one of the highest paid players or highest paid defensive contract maybe at that time, and definitely a landmark for the Steelers. But some more things we'll be coming up with over the course of the next few weeks in off season. We're going to have to do some report cards because we talked about some of the guys that are going to be going, but why might they be going? Why are we looking at, we talked about some of the guys that did poorly. Let's talk about some of the guys that may still be on the edge or had a good season. Excuse me.
There's the sneeze.
Oh, it finally came out, man. And apologies. I couldn't help it. I dusted around here. It shouldn't be like that.
By the way, I want an apology about my room.
We just have a different camera angle right now.
Did you insult? No, we don't. I cleaned it. I cleaned everything up. I told you I was in process. And now it's all clean. See, look, nothing on it. It's all good. It's beautiful. It's pretty. I got my nice little curtains. I have another set of curtains that say Steel City Underground on them too.
Yeah, those are covering that's covering the mess. You've done
well job
with that, but
because there's a TV in there and I just cover it up because it looks dumb.
Gotcha. Well, we want to see the helmets again, dude. Got to have
helmets are all stacked in there too.
Yeah, you got it. It's a work in progress. It's okay. I ignored it. I didn't say anything. I didn't question it. You know,
No, you just insulted me on the last time I was on the podcast. Like, Brian's room is a sloppy mess.
That was like 2 weeks ago. I'm surprised you could even remember that. So, anyways, folks, with that said, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave us a rating or review wherever you're watching or listening from. Thanks for tuning in. Longer shows sometimes, but at least once a week here through the off season. I don't know how some of these guys are drumming up things to talk about every single day. There's not enough things to talk about every single day in Steelers land. We're lucky if we pile enough of them up for a week. So myself and Flash were going to jump on earlier this week. We were going to do Monday or whatever, and it didn't happen. And then the Trubisky, Core 4, and Harvin news landed. I'm like, that's always like the danger. And we're right here on a Friday before the 4 o'clock news dump for the weekend. So cross your fingers, knock on wood, that we may have more things to talk about, but we'll cover them next week if that be the case. Hopefully it doesn't invalidate anything we said. Go back and watch some of the previous shows if you haven't caught those. Lots of good info that are still there. That's still there for you. And that'll do it for us. My name's Joe. His name's Brian. Till next time, folks, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.